There is something that people who have spent real time in the Everglades will tell you, something they say quietly, almost as if the swamp itself might hear them and take offense. They say the water remembers. Every person who has ever drowned out there, every body that was swallowed by the dark, tannic water and never found, they are still there, still waiting. And sometimes, if the light is wrong and the wind drops away to nothing, they look up. The Everglades is the only place on Earth where alligators and crocodiles share the same water, where bull sharks swim miles inland through freshwater canals without warning, where Burmese pythons, some of them over 17 feet long, have established a breeding population so dense that scientists are still struggling to understand the full damage they have done to the ecosystem. It is 1.5 million acres of sawgrass prairie, mangrove forest, and black water so still on certain mornings that it looks like a floor of polished obsidian. It is beautiful. It is merciless. And for a young man who took his family canoeing one afternoon in the late summer heat, it was about to become the most terrifying day of his life. His account, shared online and later compiled into documented Everglades encounter collections, begins the way most horror does, ordinarily. The sun was high. The air smelled of rot and brine, the way it always does in the backcountry. His family was paddling a narrow channel deep inside the park, the mangrove roots clawing down into the water on both sides, like the fingers of something enormous trying to hold itself up. His young cousin was ahead of him in a separate kayak. His parents were behind. The only sounds were paddles cutting water and the distant call of a great blue heron somewhere in the grass. He leaned over the side of his canoe to look into the water. The Everglades water is the color of dark tea, stained brown by the tannins from decomposing vegetation. You cannot see more than a few inches below the surface on most days. But that afternoon, in that particular channel, the water was unusually clear. And when he looked down, something looked back. He later described it as a boy, a child, floating motionless just below the surface, close enough that he should have been touching the hull of the canoe. The child had dark red eyes, not bloodshot, not discolored. Dark red, like old garnets, and they were open, and they were fixed directly on him with an expression he could only describe as hatred. Not sadness, not fear. Pure, cold, focused hatred. He pulled back from the edge so fast he nearly tipped the canoe. In the same instant, the wind, which had been completely absent, appeared from nowhere. Not a breeze. A gust, sharp and sudden, and it hit his cousin's kayak sideways and flipped it. His cousin went into the water screaming. He drove his paddle down and crossed the channel in seconds, reached into the black water with both arms and pulled her out. She was gasping and terrified, and her hands were shaking. But she was alive. They got back to the bank, and she was fine. Or so they thought. When she took off her jacket back at the campsite, her entire back was covered in bruises. Deep, purple, finger-shaped bruises. The kind you get when something grabs you hard and does not want to let go. She had no explanation for them. Nobody touched her under the water. Nobody could have. The bruises were already deep and dark, as if they had been there for hours. He went back to that area months later and spoke to a local guide who had worked those channels his entire life. The guide listened to the description of the channel, the direction, the time of year, and nodded slowly. He said that years before, long before there were any guardrails or safety warnings on the backcountry routes, a young boy had drowned in that exact stretch of water. He had accepted a dare from a group of older children to swim the channel from one bank to the other. He made it halfway before something pulled him under. The other children watched from the bank. None of them ever dove in after him. His body was recovered 2 days later. The guide said that over the years, At least 3 other people had reported something in the water in that same location. 2 of them had flipped their boats. 1 of them had not come back to shore. The Seminole people who have lived alongside this water for centuries have a name for the spirits that occupy drowned places. They are called the unliberated, the ones who died in water violently and without warning, who do not understand that they are dead, and who reach for the living because the living are warm and the dark water is very, very cold. The guide told this man one more thing before they parted. He said, "When you look into the Everglades water and something looks back, you do not make eye contact. You turn away. You paddle hard. Because the moment you hold that gaze, the moment you let it lock onto yours, it knows it has you. And then, it only needs one more second of distraction, one more gust of wind, one more careless lean over the side to finish what it started." His cousin still has the photographs from that trip. She says she cannot explain the bruises in any single one of them. She has not been back to the Everglades since. She says she does not need to go back. She says she already knows what is down there, and it already knows her name. In the entire recorded history of the Florida Everglades, no name has ever cast a longer shadow than Edgar J. Watson. He was not a legend invented to frighten children. He was not a folktale dressed up as a man. He was real. His crimes were real. And the body count he left behind along the Chatham River was real enough that more than 50 skeletal remains were eventually discovered on and around his property. The last of those remains were found decades after he died. And if you visit Chatham Bend today, deep inside what is now Everglades National Park, accessible only by boat, people who know the water will tell you to leave before dark. Edgar John Watson was born on November 11, 1855, in Edgefield County, South Carolina, to a violent and abusive father who taught the boy early that the world was a place where only the most savage survived. He killed his first man before he was 20 years old. He fled to Oklahoma where, according to multiple historical accounts, he murdered the outlaw Belle Starr, shooting her in the back from horseback on a dirt road in 1889. He was tried and acquitted. He returned to Florida, where there was a warrant out for his arrest, because Edgar Watson was the kind of man who believed rules did not apply to him and who was almost always proven right. He bought 40 acres of land at Chatham Bend, deep in the 10,000 Islands region of the Everglades, in the early 1890s. He built a 2-story house. He planted sugarcane. He hired workers, drifters, migrants, men with no families and no one to notice if they disappeared. And he built a business. The brand name on his cane syrup was Island Pride. He was wealthy enough to transport his goods by a 70-foot schooner to Fort Myers, Tampa, and Key West. The people of nearby Chokoloskee Island called him Emperor Watson, and they meant it as respect, and they meant it as fear, and they always made very sure never to make him angry. Because the workers Watson hired had a troubling habit of turning up dead in the river around payday. Bodies washed up. Bones were found in shallow graves. A young black man fled Chatham Bend in terror one afternoon and arrived shaking in Chokoloskee with a story so horrifying that grown men who heard it could not sleep. The local sheriff in Fort Myers told the community there was nothing he could do. Chatham Bend was in Monroe County, not his jurisdiction. Monroe County did not reach out. The law did not come. So Watson kept killing, and the bodies kept floating, and the community of Chokoloskee lived with it for years, because what else could they do? The Everglades had no law. Watson knew that better than anyone. He had chosen this place for exactly that reason. In October of 1910, a hurricane struck the Florida coast with peak winds of 150 miles per hour. The storm killed 101 people in Florida alone. 3 days after the hurricane passed, Watson sailed his schooner toward the Smallwood store on Chokoloskee Island. He was going to buy supplies, but the community had had enough. They were waiting for him on the shore, armed, every single one of them. When Watson saw the crowd, he pointed his shotgun at them and advanced. The gun misfired. Before he could reach for his revolver, the mob opened fire. 33 bullets entered his body. He was dead before he hit the sand. They dragged him behind a boat to a nearby quay and buried him in a shallow grave. Later, he was reburied at Fort Myers Cemetery, but not before his body had been left tied to a mangrove for days, alone in the dark and the heat. In the swamp he had terrorized for 2 decades. The Smallwood store, that same trading post where he died, still stands today on Chokoloskee Island, and it is now a museum on the National Register of Historic Places. The workers and visitors there report hearing footsteps on the 2nd floor when no one is upstairs. They hear what sounds like the dry click of a shotgun hammer being pulled back and then released. A misfire, replayed over and over. They feel a presence watching from the upper windows. And multiple visitors over the years have reported seeing a large figure standing in the mudflats below the store at low tide, dressed in dark clothes, staring at the passing boats with a face they cannot make out, but a posture they describe as furious, as if he is still waiting for someone to answer for what happened to him. Out at Chatham Bend itself, only reachable by boat, deep in the national park, the old cement cistern still stands. The sugarcane cauldron is still there, half swallowed by vegetation. And the fishing guides who know this stretch of the Chatham River well say there are certain nights, certain hot and still and moonless nights, when you can feel a weight in the air near the site of Watson's old house that has no rational explanation. A cold on warm nights. A silence more complete than silence should be. And the very specific, unmistakable sense that something is watching you from the tree line, cataloging everything it sees about you, the way a man who has gotten away with terrible things for a very long time watches the world, patiently, deliberately, and without any fear at all. More than 50 skeletons were eventually found on or near Watson's property. Many of them have never been identified. Many of them never will be. They were men and women who came to the Everglades looking for work, and found instead a murderer who paid in lead and left the river to clean up what remained. The Everglades kept his secrets for years. It keeps them still. Somewhere beneath that water, in the black tannin dark, there are people who trusted Edgar Watson and died because of it. And somewhere in the stilted wooden building at Chokoloskee, something still paces the 2nd floor at night, furious and patient, and not yet done. It has been seen, photographed, and filmed in the Everglades for over 60 years. It walks upright. It smells like death. And it doesn't want to be found. If you drive east on the Tamiami Trail, US Highway 41, past Naples, and into the heart of the Big Cypress National Preserve, you will eventually come to the town of Ochopee, which is barely a town at all. There is a campground. There is a gift shop. There is a small post office that holds the record for being the smallest post office in the entire United States. And there is the Skunk Ape Research Headquarters, which has been in operation since 1961, where a man named Dave Sheely has spent his entire life waiting for something most people do not believe exists. Dave has seen it 4 times. He was 10 years old the first time, in 1974, when his older brother picked him up over the sawgrass so he could see over the top, and he watched a 7-foot creature covered entirely in reddish-brown hair walk upright across the swamp and disappear into the cypress hammock. He has never doubted what he saw, Not once. Not for a single day of his life. The creature has been called the skunk ape since the 1960s, when documented reports began to accumulate in Collier County with a frequency that was difficult to dismiss. Before the name was coined, the Seminole and Miccosukee peoples had their own names for it, their own oral traditions describing giant, hair-covered beings that moved through the Everglades at the edge of perception, seen and then not seen, leaving behind massive four-toed footprints and an overwhelming stench of sulfur and decomposition that witnesses describe as something between rotten eggs and a dead animal left in standing water for a week. It is the smell, more than anything else, that makes people believers. You cannot fake a smell. You cannot misidentify a smell. When something that smells like that gets close to you in the middle of the night, in the middle of a swamp, your body does not wait for your brain to catch up. Your body simply runs. In December of 2000, an anonymous letter arrived at the Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. Enclosed were 2 Polaroid photographs. The letter writer explained that a large, ape-like animal had been visiting her backyard in Myakka City, Florida, eating apples she left out, and that she had managed to photograph it on 2 separate nights. The photographs show a creature crouched in the palmetto brush, massive, with long arms and dense matted fur, its eyes reflecting the camera flash with a yellowish glow. The sender's identity has never been established. The photographs have never been conclusively debunked. Primatologists and forensic image analysts who studied them have been unable to identify the creature as any known Florida animal. The photographs remain some of the most compelling cryptozoological evidence ever collected in North America. Dave Shealy's second sighting came on September 8, 1998. He was sitting in a tree stand on his property, watching. He had been baiting the area with lima beans, which the creature apparently finds irresistible, for months. He heard splashing, rhythmic, heavy splashing, moving toward him through water that was over a foot deep. At 100 yards, he saw it, walking upright, 7 feet tall, moving through standing water at a pace Shealy later estimated at 22 miles per hour. He photographed it. The figure in those photographs, even accounting for the poor resolution and long distance, is bipedal and enormous, and its gait through deep water is unlike anything a human being could produce. He made a concrete cast of a 4-toed footprint afterward. It sits in his gift shop today, and the dimensions are not within normal human range by any measurement. In 1977, the Florida State Legislature actually introduced a bill, House Bill 1664, that would have made it illegal to take, possess, harm, or molest any anthropoid or humanoid animal in the state of Florida. The bill did not pass, but the fact that it was introduced at all tells you something significant about how seriously the Florida government was taking the accumulated sighting reports at the time. Shealy estimates that between 7 and 9 skunk apes currently live in the South Florida Everglades area, moving between the Big Cypress Preserve and the Myakka Corridor. The old chief of the Seminole tribe once told him that when you see one, it is a spirit. Shealy heard this and nodded politely, and then went back out into the swamp the very next morning with his camera and his lima beans and his patience. Because Dave Shealy is a man who deals in what he can see with his own eyes, and he has seen it 4 times. And he knows that whatever it is not a spirit. It breathes. It walks. It has a family, because in his most recent sighting, he saw a mother and 2 young ones moving together through the cypress, and they moved the way families move, the same way any creature moves when it is trying to protect its young. Quietly, carefully, watching him watch them. The National Park Service's official position is that no substantiated sighting has ever been verified by their wildlife staff. No motion-activated trail camera across the thousands of research projects conducted in the Everglades has ever captured definitive proof. This is either evidence that the creature does not exist, or evidence that 1.5 million acres of dense subtropical wilderness is a very, very large place in which to hide something that doesn't want to be found. Dave Sheely leans toward the latter. He will point out, if you ask him, that the Burmese python established an entire breeding population in the Everglades for decades before scientists even had an accurate count of how many were out there. The swamp is good at keeping secrets. It always has been. And whatever the skunk ape is, flesh or spirit, survivor or ghost, it has been keeping its secret in those cypress groves for longer than anyone alive has been watching. He also told me this: if you ever do harm one, you will not make it out of the Everglades alive. He said it simply, without drama, the way you state a fact you know from experience. He lit a cigarette and watched a 10-foot alligator emerge from a mud hole on the other side of his fence. He did not look worried. He looked like a man at peace with everything that shares the water with him. Every single last terrifying thing. The most feared creature in Seminole mythology is not a monster from outside. It is a neighbor. It wears a human face, and it is already among you. There are stories that are told cautiously. There are stories that are told quietly, with the lights on, in rooms with no windows facing the swamp. And then there are stories that certain Seminole medicine people refuse to tell at all, because they believe, and have always believed, that the act of speaking certain names aloud is not storytelling. It is invitation. The creature in this story has a name. I'm going to tell you what that name is. But I want you to understand, before I do, that according to the people who have lived alongside this thing for centuries, speaking it out loud puts you at risk. It may make you a target. In the very darkest telling of this tradition, it may begin your transformation into one of them. You have been warned. The name is Stikini. The Stikini, also spelled Stikini, Ishtikini, are among the oldest and most feared creatures in Seminole tradition. They are not born as monsters. That is the most terrifying part of this. The Stikini begins its existence as a human being, a person. Someone who sits beside you at the fire, who knows your children's names, who smiles at you in the morning and asks how you slept. The transformation into a Stikini comes from a choice, a sustained, deliberate practice of evil, a growing hunger for something darker than ordinary human cruelty. The more evil a person commits, the deeper the corruption goes, until the body can no longer contain what the soul has become. And then the night comes, when they walk into the dark, and they do what they do, and they come back to you the next morning with the same human face and the same polite voice, and you will never know. You will never know until it is too late. By day, the Stikini resembles a Seminole person completely. They live in the village. They speak the language. They may be recognizable only by a slight strangeness in their manner, a tendency to stand slightly apart, a gaze that holds a half-second too long, a lack of the normal social cues that make a person feel like a person. Some accounts say they eat almost nothing during the day. Some say they sleep with their eyes open. Once the moon rises, they go to a place where they are alone. And then they vomit. They vomit up their internal organs, their stomach, their intestines, their heart, their lungs. And what is left is a 9-foot undead owl that hunts on silent wings through the darkness with a single purpose: finding a sleeping person so that it can reach into their chest and eat the heart while they sleep. The victim never wakes up. In the morning, they are simply dead, with no mark on their body and no explanation that the living can provide. The cry of the Stikini is said to be guttural and horrible. Not a natural owl sound, but something that sits wrong in the ear. Something that makes the body cold even before the brain registers why. Seminole tradition holds that if you hear the Stikini cry, it is a death omen, not a general warning, a specific, personal announcement. It has seen you. It has selected you. And the only question that remains is whether you will be sleeping or awake when it arrives. In Florida, in the Everglades, where owls cry from the cypress trees every single night of the year, without pause or season, this tradition has never faded. There are Seminole communities today where grandmothers still will not speak the name above a whisper, where medicine people are the only ones entrusted to tell the full story, because they are the only ones with the spiritual training to protect themselves while doing so. There are documented accounts from the early 20th century of families finding their loved ones dead in the night, with no visible cause of death. And when Seminole spiritual leaders were asked for an explanation, the answer was always the same, always delivered quietly, always followed by a series of protective rituals performed over the body and the home and anyone who had shared a roof with the deceased. What makes the Stikini so uniquely, devastatingly frightening, more frightening than the skunk ape, more frightening than the ghost in the water, is that it offers no reassurance of separation. The monster in the swamp, the creature in the river, those things you can navigate around. You can stay off the water at night. You can choose a different trail. But the Stikini does not live in the swamp. It lives in the community. It sits across from you at meals. It knows when you sleep. It knows what room your children are in. The fear it produces is not the fear of encountering something wild and dangerous in an uncontrolled space. It is the fear of discovering that the world you thought was safe isn't safe, that the face you trust is not trustworthy, that there is something wearing the shape of a neighbor that comes for your heart in the dark, and the only reason you are still alive is that last night it chose someone else. In the Everglades, where nights are black and hot and the owls are never silent, that is not a comfortable thought to fall asleep with. And here is the last thing the tradition tells us. The Stikini before its transformation, the human being in its daytime form, often shows no outward sign of what it is becoming, except for one: the eyes. Just for a moment, sometimes, in a certain light, the eyes catch wrong. Not dark, not clouded. Just slightly, briefly, wrong. And by the time you notice it and think, that was strange, and you begin to form the question, the moment has passed. The face is human again, and it is smiling at you, and there is nothing you can prove. 5 Navy bombers, 14 crew members. December 5th, 1945. They took off and they never came back, and neither did the plane sent to find them. The war was over. That is the context you need to hold on to as this story unfolds. The context that makes it so much worse. The war was over. The men who flew out of Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station on the afternoon of December 5th, 1945, had survived the most destructive conflict in human history. They had made it. They were home. They were doing a routine training exercise in clear weather over familiar water, and they were supposed to be back in 2 hours. And 14 of them never came home at all. And the most terrifying part is not the disappearance itself. The most terrifying part is what the radio operators heard in those final 30 minutes before the silence fell. Flight 19 was a training patrol of 5 TBM Avenger torpedo bombers, carrying 14 crew members total, departing from the Naval Air Station in Fort Lauderdale on a clear December afternoon. The mission was a triangular navigation exercise, a standard training run, flown over these same routes dozens of times before. The weather was described by the station as favorable. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, an experienced pilot, was leading the flight. It should have taken 2 hours. It should have been nothing. At approximately 3:40 in the afternoon, less than 2 hours into the exercise, Taylor contacted the Fort Lauderdale Tower. He was not calling to announce his return. He was calling because something was wrong. His compasses, he said, were malfunctioning. Both of them. He said the ocean below him did not look right. He said he was not sure where they were. Over the next 30 minutes, radio operators at Fort Lauderdale listened to transmissions from Flight 19 that escalated from confusion to concern, to something that can only be described as contained terror. Multiple crew members spoke. Their voices were clipped and professional in the way that military training demands. But underneath the training, in the edges of the transmissions, there was something else. Taylor told his flight to maintain formation. He told them they would fly until they found land, or until they ran out of fuel, whichever came first. At one point, another pilot in the flight took over navigation from Taylor, believing they were over the Gulf of Mexico, when Taylor believed they were over the Atlantic. They were arguing. They were lost. The compasses were still broken. And then, at approximately 7:04 p.m., the transmission stopped. The sky was silent. 5 aircraft and 14 men were gone. The Navy sent out a rescue mission immediately. A Martin Mariner flying boat, a massive, reliable aircraft with a crew of 13, departed at 7:27 p.m. on a search pattern over the last known position of Flight 19. At 7:50 p.m., a tanker ship in the area reported seeing a large explosion in the sky over the water. The Mariner was never heard from again. In a single night, the Navy had lost 6 aircraft and 27 men in perfect weather, with no enemy in the area. A search covering hundreds of miles of ocean and Everglades coastline went on for days. Not a single piece of wreckage was found. Not a life raft. Not a body. Nothing. As if 5 bombers and 2 search aircraft had simply ceased to exist. It is this event, this specific, documented official United States military catastrophe, that gave birth to the concept of the Bermuda Triangle. The story of Flight 19 was the first major data point in what would become a legend of an area of the Atlantic where ships and planes vanish with no rational explanation. And here is the detail that the Everglades horror lexicon has always held close. One corner of the Bermuda Triangle touches the Florida coast at the Everglades. The same water, the same darkness, the same bottomless tannic swamp where things go in and do not come out. Investigators have proposed theories over the decades. The compasses malfunctioned. This much seems clear. Taylor may have become disoriented and turned the flight in the wrong direction over open ocean until they ran out of fuel and ditched into the sea. The Mariner may have exploded from a fuel leak, which those aircraft were known for. These explanations are rational. They are probable. They are almost certainly correct. And yet, not a single piece of wreckage from any of the 6 aircraft has ever been definitively recovered. The ocean keeps its silence. The Everglades keeps its silence. And somewhere in the black water off the Florida coast, 14 young men who survived a world war are still waiting to be found. They have been waiting for 80 years. And they will keep waiting, in the dark, in the deep, for whatever comes next, if anything ever does. In the Everglades, where the water is shallow enough in places to stand in, and deep enough in others to swallow a man whole without leaving a ripple, there is no shortage of things that simply vanish. The locals have a phrase for it. They say the swamp takes what it wants. It has taken men and machines and planes and memory, and it has given back nothing. Not one bone, not one piece of metal, not one word of explanation. And on a clear December night, if you stand on the edge of the Tamiami Trail and look east over the water, where the sky meets the sawgrass. It is very easy to believe that somewhere out there, far below whatever surface you can see, the dark water is full of things that went in and never came out. Full of things that are still, in the most impossible and unacceptable and undeniable sense, there.